Well, Shabbos, y'all. Spoken like a Hasidim. Hasid, as it were, since I was singular. Well, kids, I'm still trying to finish up I don't know what to call it. It's as if I'm writing a whole new, like a summary of my dissertation that has to be uploaded to the website at Oxford before I can go any further. And I've had just the hardest time getting this thing done. It's funny that when I started my educational journey, or I should say restarted it about 20 years ago, I couldn't come up with more than a sentence or two to get a point across. I'd say a sentence or two and I felt that I was done. And, that's not. So over the years, I've gotten to where there's so many things that I feel like I have to say to make sure the information that's going across has been nuanced. Because you say something and you make a general statement, and the next thing you know, you're getting 300 to 500 emails every day calling you a lying demon out of the pit of hell, because they took what you said wrong, or in some way you didn't mean it, or you left some detail out that they deemed important. They couldn't just take the general statement as a general statement. It sounds a lot like what's going on with politics today, doesn't it? And I've been dealing with that for years, long before the politics got the way they are now. I remember a few years ago, it's, I don't know, 6 to 10 years ago, our oldest daughter asked the question, were the things going on around us, did they remind us of something in the Bible and that sort of thing? And at the time, I remember thinking, she's thinking New Testament, no doubt. And my response was, no, this looks more like what's going on in the old. I said old because she's Christian and all that stuff, and trying to be respectful. And she's, surprisingly to me, that's the way she was seeing it. She said it's a lot like you got one king that follows the law, and the next king doesn't, the next king does, and the next king doesn't. And I was really impressed that she had caught that, because that's what I was seeing, what I saw happening was that you would have different governors that would come in the various states, and one would be very conservative and believe in the law and believe in justice. And then the next one would come in and the law was something essentially that could be purchased. It went to the highest bidder, and people were seriously, people were going up the river. First time offenders were going down for 10-year sentences and stuff like that. And then the next one would come in and they would try to clean it up. And, and that was just one of the aspects. There was a lot of things going on. There would be one that would be very liberal, and then the next would be not liberal at all. Started falling away with the Clinton intern thing, I'll put it that way, because it brought such indecency into the position of president and the idea of the White House and all that was American. As time went on, the moral structure of this country just kept breaking down, not because of that incident. That incident was just apropos of what was going on in America itself, the breaking the breaking down of decency, the breaking down of moral values and things like that. And the next guy came in and he seemed a little moral and all that kind of stuff, but the downward slide of morality and the downward slide of believing in the Constitution and all that just kept going further and further down. Even when these, more positive people would come in. I mean, you've got a guy that was, supposed to be a big believer in the Constitution, and before you know it, he comes right out and says, this is probably not constitutional, but we're going to do it anyway. It was not constitutional, and they're still doing it years later. They're still doing illegal search and seizures on all of America. And the way the politicians got around that was, hey, instead of us doing it, instead of the police doing it, why don't we let Google do it? Why don't we let Facebook do it? So I'm saying all that not to be political. And I'm not trying to say things against Google or Facebook. Of course they're going to do it. There's money in it, I mean, they're capitalist. They're not socialist, they're capitalist. And they're the kind of capitalist, the crony capitalism, that gives capitalism a bad name. Because these are the kind of greedy people who they've made their money. Now they want to slam the door shut behind them so that nobody else can compete with them. Wow. But people have been doing that from the beginning of time, and they'll do it probably till the end of time, no doubt. So what we've seen is this steady decline in morality, this steady decline in religiosity, if you will. People, the longer time has gone, the more. There was a time when more and more and more and more people kept calling themselves Christians, and less and less and less and less and less of them went to church. Same way with, Catholicism had that problem. Everybody's been lumped into Christianity. Protestants, couldn't think of the word. Protestants had that problem. Jews have that problem with their synagogues. And then you have you have two Islams. The radicals will never admit to that. They will never agree with that, probably. But you have two Islams. You have the one where their numbers are going up. Their attendees are going up. They've been going in the opposite direction, or were going. I think that's kind of come to an end at this point. But they were going in the opposite direction. More and more people joining the radical ranks. More and more people showing up to their ideology. And I think there was a reason for it too. I think the reason was people are looking for something real, something that they can get behind. They're looking for something greater than themselves to be a part of. So where in America we've gone away from the things that we used to think were of high mind, if you will. And over in the Middle East, it was, people turning to the radicalism. The other Islam is the westernized Islam. They're the ones that believe in equality. They don't believe that everybody ought to be murdered for their life choices and what have you. That's an Americanized version of it. It is not the Eastern version of it. So I'm not saying there's nobody in the East that believes in life and love and let's all get along and go along. No, there are people like that everywhere. And on the other side, westernized, we do have the radicals among us, So I'm just talking in general terms here, and I'm doing this on purpose because this is exactly what was going on in the close of what is called in the Western world the Old Testament canon. It's exactly what was going on. You had the different religions with their different radical groups who believed that, killing people was God's will. And it's not. It's a perversion of God's word. God is all for us defending ourselves and defending the lives of our family and our neighbors and our friends. God's not against that. But he is against murder in all of its ugly forms. God's against that. The Bible's against that. But to say that we have to kill off people so that, God, we can usher in the Messiah, oh my good Lord. No, people, what? You know what I'm saying. But what's going on right now, you over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's probably been going on longer than that, but I'd have to research it out to figure out where it all started. But particularly in the last 5 years, there has been a plunge into darkness in the American world, and it matches perfectly with the darkness that befell the Middle East at the end of the Old Testament canon, if you will. And then as we moved into the New Testament canon, there was this feeling that there was this enlightenment happening. People were on board with all kinds of things. They were coming up with new religions. They were developing new things. There's a group they call the Gnostics. And now if you go to any college in the Western world, they'll tell you that the Gnostics were Christians and the Christians were actually not. Oh, good Lord. Whatever, you got to come up with a new wind of doctrine. And if you can't do that, what you do, I'm going to give you the secret here. This is what smart people do. If they can't come up with one on their own, if they can't study one out and teach it properly, they just take what's out there and go the opposite direction. Ooh, that's really smart. The only problem with that is the argument I gave in grade school when these enlightened people came to talk to us in our grade school was, if you're going to stand up for the opposite of everything your parents say, don't you have to learn your parents' stuff before you can have your own thought? And if that's the case, how is it your own thought? You're just doing the opposite of what your parents say, because that's what we were being taught. Those college students, actually, I got sent to the principal's office and they went away and we never saw them again. That's the education system in California. Way back when. Anyway, I caught that. I was 5 or 6 years old and I said that. I'll never forget that day. It was incredible. It's just the dumbest thing I'd ever heard what I saw as an adult ever say. Because they were college students. They were supposed to be old and wise, but I didn't see any wisdom in what they were saying. But now we've gone, they started all of these groups. You had people studying numerology again. That thing has reared its head over and over and over again. You had people looking for truth anywhere but the book itself. Let's not open it up and read it and see what it says. No. What could God possibly have known? What could God possibly have said in that book that could be deeper than us taking and making stuff up? Oh, things ridiculous. But anyway, you get into the first century and right in the smack middle of it, all of a sudden you've got these crowds going through the towns. Well, I guess this was going on before the mid, but it was heavy in the mid again, among the Jews. But you had these crowds going in and burning stuff down and causing these insurrections, they were called, and people were getting killed. And, they thought they could, you'd have 30 people that thought they could take on the Roman army. That's, because their God was going to help them. They're saying, hey, if you don't give us what we want, we're going to burn it all down. We're going to burn it down, y'all. That didn't bode well for their heads staying on their shoulders. I'm just saying. And we're kind of in the same place right now, aren't we? These people think that they can take down the government of this country, or they can take on the military. They cannot, but they can take down America, because it's happened over and over and over again throughout history. The Roman army, nobody could imagine that somebody could take down the Egyptian army. The Egyptians of the Bible, they did not look anything like the Egyptians of today. The Egyptians of today have light olive skin, they have a white man's nose, and they have what is termed in beautician circles, at least of the 60s and 70s, I suppose, black hair, which meant it was real curly. Sure, they didn't look like that. Go back and look at not at the pictures that were drawn. All of the pictures, you notice, all of them looked more like today. They had the straight noses and all of that. Mm-hmm. And you look at the sarcophagus they're in, they always have the face thing done, and it always has this nice straight nose. And then you look at the mummies, and they have a very wide nose and great big lips. In fact, all of the busts that were made of the kings, they had the wide nose and the big lips. They were black. They were Ethiopian black. They were literally the color black. If you've ever been to Africa or seen anyone from Africa, you know what I'm talking about. That is actually one of the prettiest colors of skin tone you'll ever see in your life. It is beautiful. They were not olive-colored people. So Moses, yeah, he knew he was Jewish all along for two reasons. One, he was circumcised. Although it's believed that some, if not all, of the Egyptians of the time were in fact circumcised. That's I don't know how you prove that, but they know at least some of them were, because they were mummified, and you can tell. Anyway, so that may not have been the issue, but Moses would have been olive colored, and nowhere near the dark color of these guys. His lips wouldn't have looked the same. His nose wouldn't look the same. You know what I'm talking about, right? Can I say these things? I don't even know if I can. That was the most powerful army known to man. They had conquered every known world in their time. They were massive in size. They had massive numbers of horses and chariots and weaponry and all of that kind of stuff. And they went down. The Persians came along. Now they look more like what we think of as Egyptians, right? Maybe today we would say more like the Arabs, except obviously they had very curly hair. So they would have looked more like the Egyptians, to my mind. Of today, they would have had the curly hair, they would have had the olive skin, and they did have straighter noses. They come along, it's same thing. Only they have more weaponry. They have more chariots and fancier ones that go faster, and more people with the bow and arrows to shoot. And I don't know, just more of everything. Right? They went down, and then you get the Greeks and particularly the Romans come through, and whoa, look out! That's on the Romans come in, and that's more like the scale of today's armies. I mean, that was huge. That was powerful. They had incredible fighting skill and incredible money to back up their campaigns and stuff like that. And they went down. And on it goes. The Ottoman Empire went down. They weren't as big and as powerful, but they were a big, powerful army. And that's Muslim, by the way. And then you come along, and eventually you've got, Europe. Holy cow. The sun didn't even go down on their empire. They did kind of get a head start via the Romans, but they were powerful. Then Germany, whoa, look at that. Russia, look at them. America, holy cow. And in these small groups that represent 0.003% of our population are going to take on an army like that? Mm-mm. But all of these places went down, and it was the same story every time. There was the rebellions and the uprisings and all of that kind of stuff. And what happened in the first century, particularly among the Jews, is that people became comfortable pointing at somebody Jewish born that had gone to a synagogue every Shabbat of their entire life, that went to the celebrations, that paid their tithes and made their offerings. And the Jews became comfortable with pointing at them and saying, you're not a Jew because, and you're not a Jew because, and you're not a Jew because. And I noticed that Christianity started doing that years back. Well, we got the truth because, so they're not legitimate because we got the truth. And every time you turned around, every single organization is split off from this one, is split off from that one, is split off from this one, they all had the truth and nobody else did. It's exactly like saying you're not a Jew because, right? And then the next thing you know, we got a president of, and he's going around saying, that's not my America. That's not the America I believe in. That's not the America. In other words, you're not an American. You're not an American. You're not an American. Next thing you know, you've got the parties, the Democrats. You're not a Democrat. You're not a Democrat. You're not a Democrat. You're not a Republican. You're not a Republican. Are you hearing it? These are the things that actually take down entire nations. And it's real simple. A house divided against itself will fall. You can bet your bottom dollar on it. Because historically speaking, they always have. Israel's doing it to themselves again. You're not a Jew. You're not a Jew. You're not a Jew. I kind of thought it was funny that for an entire year of going to school and studying under Shalom, he refused to call me by my name. He called me Ha-Kelev, the dog. You guys know the story. I finally got up enough courage after a year to say, how come you keep calling me the dog? He said, were you born in Israel? See, that was his excuse for me not being a Jew. I wasn't born in Israel. I can't be a real Jew. Wow. I mean, here we go again. And it's not pretty, right? So it's never too late. Yirmiyahu, you guys know who he was? Yeah, you do. Jeremiah. He pled with the people of God. He cried. He moaned. He groaned. He gave it everything he had. Just turn back to God. And that's the running theme throughout the entire history of God's children. It's just do what God said. Just do what God said. Just turn back to God. Just do what God said. And then we get to these places of desperation. Everything's going bad. We're all on the edge and worried about, we see the end coming. Oh, the end is coming. And some people sit back and let it happen, and other people try to help it happen because they think this is going to usher in Messiah. I mean, you have that in most of the Eastern religions believe in a Messiah, and most of them think that they can usher in Messiah by the world going to, can I say hell in a handbasket in a family-friendly setting? I don't know what else to call it. Maybe something will come to me. Anyway, no, this isn't how it works. trust me, all of this has something to do with what's coming up with Yom Kippurim. I picked up a book a couple of days ago. I found it. I was looking for a couple of books that I needed some information out. I read them years ago, and I quoted them in my dissertation, but Oxford wanted more information about the book. So I'm up there, on a ladder digging stuff around, and I found a book that I purchased that I didn't remember I owned. And I had marked up a couple of pages of it, and that was it. I'm talking a couple, maybe 2, maybe 3 pages. And I didn't read the rest of the book. I tossed it away, and I thought, well, why would I do that? I'm not normally like that. Somebody has to be really off base for me not to read their book. And, it really has to be poorly done. And so I picked the book up and I started reading it, and this thing's fabulous, right? It's like, wow, this is incredible. So after I finished a couple chapters, I thought, well, I wonder what else, is coming up. And I noticed that toward the back, there's chapter 8's Phariseeism in the... I thought, that's why I bought this, because, I've been translating the New Testament letters for a lot of years now. And once you read my translation, you'll know why it's taken that long. But I thought, that's why I bought it, because it had a title it had a chapter like that. And so I, of course, jumped ahead last night and thought, I'm going to see what it said, because I don't remember this. And I opened the thing up and I started reading it, and he's talking about Paul converted to Christianity, and he hated Judaism, and everybody in the New Testament hated Judaism and rejected Judaism. And it was like, I guarantee you, when I got the book, that was the first place I went. I read that nonsense, and I tossed the book. So, fortunately for me, last night I'd already read a couple of chapters, the first, and they're wonderful. So, I probably will finish most of the book. I don't see any reason to read that New Testament stuff at this point, because it shows a heavy bias, lack of any real discernible knowledge on his part about the New Testament, because Paul did not convert from Judaism to Christianity. That's utterly impossible, because Christianity did not exist when Paul was alive. He did not hate the Jews. He did not reject the Jews. He did not teach that God rejected the Jews. He said, God forbid, for I am a Jew. It's like everything he said, what the Christian church has come to believe, and apparently most Jews, is the opposite of what he actually wrote. Paul didn't write any of that stuff. Paul taught us to follow the law. He said it was perfect, pure, and holy. That's what he said about the law. And in the same sentence, it says, don't follow the law, it's awful and terrible, right? That ought to tell you something. He is either doing a comparison contrast, which that would not be a good one, or some translator is trying to keep a narrative flowing and changing the words. All you got to do is take the negative article out. If he says, you should never reject the law, what happens if you take never out? You have no idea how many times that happened. It's that simple. Move a comma, you change the complete meaning of something. I'll give you an example. Most of you have heard me say this before. There's a verse, I don't remember where it is. I think it's in Isaiah. I may be wrong, I don't remember. But it says, they will fear him from the rising of the sun, I think, so from the west, and to the setting of the same, to the east, from the east to the west, which is still an idiom meaning from all over. It doesn't mean just from the east and the west, and forget about the north and south. No, this means from everywhere. So shall they fear him. When the enemy comes in, comma. Now let's put the comma somewhere else. When the enemy comes in like a flood, comma, the Lord will lift a standard up against him. So when the enemy comes in like a flood, God's going to wait until the enemy is just pounding on you before he does something. Or we can move that comma. When the enemy comes in, comma, like a flood, the Lord will lift up a standard. Which one do you think is right? Who's more powerful? Just saying. It's the Lord coming in like a flood, or going out like a flood, as it were, not the enemy coming in. So it takes very little effort to take something that someone said and make it the opposite of everything they ever said. I used to play for a famous country music singer, and while I was in his band, his bass player used to do that to me. He would take everything I said and flip it around, and by the time the singer, songwriter extraordinaire would find out about it, he would be so angry with me that, no, you're not going to talk. You're just going to sit there and listen, and scream at me and tell me off, and shame on you for saying those things that I never said. But anyway, that guy was good at twisting my words. And in your translations, those guys were good at twisting those words. They were not translating. The Bibles that are in English were not written so that you would know what the disciples said when they wrote those letters. They were written so that you would fall in line with their religious practices and services. It had nothing to do with the truth. Nothing. So Christianity is, not only should it not even exist, it's never been on the right course. People cannot straighten that rudder. It cannot be fixed. Judaism did exactly the same thing Christianity did. They were disconnected, utterly disconnected. The Jews were utterly disconnected from Judaism, and they didn't even know it. Because they lost their temple, they lost their homeland, they were kicked out, they lost their language. Yes, they lost their language. And so other men, 1,000 years later, came along and reinvented Judaism. It's what we know today as Judaism. It has no connection to the reality of the Bible. None. So you've got two groups that are completely off base, and they've been so hardcore at what they've done that people who used to love those religions can't even bring themselves to be a part of it anymore. In fact, some of them hate their religion and anybody who would stand up for it. And we've got the same thing going on in the secular world between the left and the right, if you will, right? So there's all of this division going on. It's all going on predominantly because we've allowed to lose our civility. We've allowed ourselves to lose our courtesy. We've allowed ourselves to let the anger rage monster out and not have self-control. We've allowed ourselves to think more about ourselves than about our own children. It used to be parents would stay together for the sake of the children. They'd stay together at least until those children were out of the house. Now it's like phooey on that. My happiness is so important, I'm not going to stop and wonder about whether divorcing my spouse is going to have a profound effect on my child or not. We don't even know to think that way anymore because we've become so self-absorbed. And Christianity failed in America. That's our biggest problem here. It's not Judaism, it's Christianity, in that they went toward the flesh. They turn salvation into everything that you have ever done can be forgiven in less than 8 seconds flat. All you got to do is say, God, I'm sorry for all the things that I've done. Please forgive me in the name of Jesus. Oh, yeah, you got to add, come into my heart. I believe in Jesus must have to be part of it. I don't know the prayer. I just know it can be said in 8 seconds or so. I don't really know the prayer. Okay, you do this in 8 seconds. Everything that you've ever done is forgiven. You don't have to go back and apologize to anyone for any of your bad behavior. You don't have to pay back somebody you ripped off. You don't have to make anything right. You've been wiped clean, and you go on and you live your life, and no matter what you do, say, or don't do and say, from this point on is no problem, and you're still going to heaven. You don't have to go to your church. You don't have to give money to support it. You don't have to go give your time to support it. You don't have to pick up your Bible. You don't have to study it. You don't have to know anything about it. You can just go on and run your porno shop by day and whatever else by night, right? And you're good. And everybody knows deep down inside, this isn't right. Just like the kids in Antifa, they actually think that they're fighting for something, or they say they think that they're fighting for something that's above them, something greater than them, because they've been convinced somehow that we can do what everybody else has done and failed at, but we'll do it right. It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Somehow we're going to do the same thing that everybody else has done, has failed, but we're going to do it right, and things are going to be better. And I guarantee you, somewhere deep down inside, they know good and well, that beating up innocent people, beating them nearly to death, is wrong. They know good and well that burning down people's businesses, up cars, and shooting police officers, ambushing police officers and shooting them while they're sitting in their cars, they know this is wrong. There's not one of them that thinks this is right. They're saying it. Just like people who say they're Christian, they say it, but they know better. The people running the Black Lives Matter group, it's the same thing. They're saying it, but they know what they're doing is not right. They know that they are prejudiced and hate white people. That's what that organization is. People joined up because the first thing when people said Black Lives Matter, there were people saying, yeah, sure, all lives matter. What do because they didn't get it. And they're like, no, Black Lives Matter. We're standing up for the atrocities being done against us. Well, everybody's for that. Nobody wants black people treated bad, right? But that's not what the organization was about. So you got all these people that put their name to something, put their money to something, and they all know now if they're still for it, it's the talk and the knowing are two different things. And the people who started this whole thing knew that they were lying from the beginning. You can't get away from this. It's worldwide. It's happening with the Israelis in Israel. It's happening with the Arabs. It's happening, although I don't know, this thing going on with the peace accords and stuff all over the Middle East is unbelievable. It's phenomenal. But so I don't know if I should add them to it, but it is going on among the leadership in Iran and Hamas and groups like that. That they're having the same problem. They know that what they're saying and what they're doing are wrong. We all know it. Yet we're all fighting as if it's real, as if it's true. And the one thing that we know we should all be able to know is true. Let's say there is no God. Let's say he didn't tell anybody the right way of living as opposed to the wrong way of living. Let's say that's not what that Torah is. Let's say all that Torah is a document that was written by a group of men, because if you think about it, Moshe may well have written the whole thing by himself. There's reason to say, well, now wait a minute, how did he write the part about that's in there after he died? Okay, so maybe someone helped him out there. But the point is, that was the foundation. That was the constitution that made Judaism come into reality. And when they followed that constitution, they prospered. And people lived in peace. Because that constitution demands that we take responsibility for ourselves, and that if we want civility in our world, we had to start by looking at the man in the mirror, as Michael Jackson once said. It's a good idea. It's a great idea. You with you. Because in the end, where else would you start? You can't go off and tell somebody, hey, you got to live this way. If you're not living that way, we should be able to look at our politicians and know how wrong that is, because they tell us to live one way and they live another. We call that hypocrisy, and it is. So we gotta. Yom Kippurim is our time to reflect. What did we do this past year? Did we live according to God's law? Or did we fail miserably because we allowed ourselves to get caught up in the politics, or we allowed ourselves to get caught up in the that we all need to really search our souls about? Did we get caught up in the fear? Because we have some friends that they're all but hiding in the closets in their bedrooms. I mean, they are terrified. You got the COVID, the numbers say that COVID is essentially over in America, but you got the politicians using it because they think it's going to help them get Trump out of office. It may. I don't know. I don't do politics. I don't know how that works. From that point of view, maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. I don't. Some days I think it will. Some days I don't. Some days I have more confidence in the American people, and then other days I don't have any confidence in them. But in the end, what Yom Kippurim does, and I'm saying it plural because that's what it is, it's not singular, it's the coverings. It's what salvation really is. Salvation isn't God forgiving you and you can go off and forget about what you've done. No, that's not how God's world works. If you stole some money, you owe some money. If you stole some stuff, you owe some stuff. Salvation is the reconciliation of God's people to their constitution, the Torah. Salvation for America is real simple. It's to reestablish our faith, belief, and practice in our Constitution. It is that simple. How do you do that? It seems so complicated. Everybody's so divided. It's fine. Of all people. You start by looking at the man in the mirror. Or woman, as it were. Some of you are listening are not men. You're women. So we start with ourselves. And if we start with ourselves, if we go back and we live by the Constitution that God gave us as his children, it will spread. My fear in all of this is not the failure of America. It's not the Civil War, because I've been in war. We're nowhere near a civil war. There's no way that that small group of people can fight our military. It ain't going to happen. They wouldn't survive it. They don't, these are not trained military people. These are punks. These are thugs that are out here doing this. They will suffer and some die from hypothermia within the first week. And not hypothermia, I used the wrong word. What's that when you're thirsty? When you don't get water? Dehydration. They'll die from dehydration in the first week to 2 weeks. Because you get in a war situation and you get pinned down in some place where there isn't any water. Good luck with that, non-military trained person. You have no idea what you're up against. That's not where this is going. It isn't. Do what? Oh. We're not headed there. We're just headed toward more incivility. Yeah, we're going to have it. There's going to be more rioting in November. You can count on it. But it will peter out. The winter will set in. People will get cold, and they'll go home. That's what's called a winter soldier. They're not tough like the one in the Marvel movies. They're pansies. Anyway. What we're looking at is what Yom Kippurim is all about, and we're going to really talk about that tonight, or tomorrow night. Sorry, 7 p.m. Same time, same place. No, not same time, but same place. We're going to talk about that, and from a biblical point of view, of course. I thought today I would talk about it from a, I don't know, person, human point of view. I don't know what I was trying to do. But, and I want to share some of this stuff from this book. It is incredible. We just got to start with ourselves. And you know, I hope, that the prayer of a righteous man has a big impact. So if we're not praying, if we're not meditating and talking with our God, who was gracious enough to make a sacrifice such that we could do such things, we have the ability, because of what that sacrifice is, to have a face-to-face relationship with God like the one Moshe had. He was the example. That's what we're supposed to be experiencing. Something along those lines. I mean, maybe if we were to build a tabernacle and go back there, our face would come out all shiny. I don't know. That's not the point. That's just the metaphoric, idiomatic image of it, right? Because it's just supposed to show you how powerful this relationship can be between man and God. That's what the whole story is about. It's not that your face will really turn shiny. But we can have that. But we can only have that if we return to our Constitution, if we return to the law of God, if we live out the law. Well, Rob, I didn't run away from it. I didn't either. But a lot of people around us have. And the only way we're going to change that is to get them to see how we live our lives, and we can't do that hiding in our closets. So, no, I'm not telling you to go out and try to save the world. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we have to, it starts somewhere. Why not start with us? Why not us just keep living our lives according to God's law? All of it, not part of it. Wear your fringe. Celebrate your holidays. pay your tithe, make your offerings. Those are your sacrifices, if you will. Sunday night, before you eat you dinner, you need to cook it on a grill, if you recall. Do that. Make sure your meal, make sure it's cooked on it. You don't have to do it. You can go to a steakhouse if you want to and tell them, I want a steak cooked on a grill, on an open fire. That's the main thing. And technically, if it's in a pan on an open fire, that's acceptable. Just make sure you do that. Make sure your restaurant's doing that if that's where if you decide to do that. If not, cook it out on your grill or put it in a pan on an open flame on your stove. If you have an electric one, you're kind of out of luck. And no, a microwave doesn't do the job. You need open fire to cook your food tomorrow night. Don't forget that. Or tomorrow at I was just thinking, if you did that Sunday before sundown, that won't work because the day doesn't start until the sun goes down. So Monday before the sun goes down, make sure you eat meat that was cooked over an open flame. Unless you're going to come to this Yom Kippurim service, which won't last but maybe an hour, and then afterwards, maybe you want to cook something. You could cook it in advance and then just reheat it cook it over a flame and then maybe reheat it afterwards. If you want to do that, that would be acceptable. But if you're going to do that, I'd say just wait till Monday and get it fresh. It's always better that way. Just thought I'd better tell you that. But anyway, follow it all of it. It's not hard. The Bible even tells you this is not hard. It's not grievous, I think is how it says it in King James. That means it's not hard. God's law is not hard. It's hard to get our heads around it early on, but wouldn't you agree by now, those of you who have been with me for any length of time, it's getting a lot easier? I think it's very easy. It's just getting used to the lifestyle. Once you get used to the lifestyle, it's just the way you live. And that, my friend, is what the Bible calls salvation. That's your covering, your lifestyle, not some sacrifice. The sacrifice was to give us the right to have this lifestyle, to live this lifestyle, and know that God has accepted our offering. And what is our offering? Our for sin. Our offering for sin is not something that we do every year. Our offering for sin is what we do every day. It's our lifestyle. I'm going to go into that probably a little deeper on Sunday and try to thoroughly explain what sin is not, what salvation is, and what salvation is not, so that we fully understand what Yom Kippurim is. If you want to fast, which is a traditional thing among some Jews, not all. In fact, most of them just pretend to fast. Just saying. Apparently, it's Seinfeld or Billy Crystal, one of the two. I think it was Billy Crystal who told us that. In fact, I'm sure it was now that I'm thinking about it. Let's not do that. Let's not pretend to live the lifestyle. Let's live the lifestyle. God does not tell us we have to fast on Yom Kippurim. But if you want to do that, go ahead. And a fast, by the way, in the Jewish world, in modern Judaism, is that you don't eat anything all day, you just eat dinner. Why? Because you ate dinner after the sun went down, it was the next day. That's how it worked. That's a more modern approach to it. In the Bible, if you wanted to fast, it didn't have anything to do with not eating. It had everything to do with not talking. And that also had something to do with feeding the poor, clothing the naked, if you will, because it's the way it says it in the Bible. It just means somebody needs some, you see out homeless people, they can always use a new t-shirt. That's what it's talking about. and just helping people in need, visiting the elderly and stuff like that. That's what a real fast is. And if you want to engage in a fast, that would be the one I would suggest. Go see your ailing grandparents or parents. Go, I don't know, clean their house or cook them a meal or something. Spend some time with them. It'd be best if you did that. I started saying it'd be best if you did that with a stranger, but that might get you arrested. So find a way to do one of those things. To go to an orphanage, uh, go to an old folks' home and sing old spirituals. Dawn and I used to do that, and they really, really appreciated that. Anyway, I've said all I need to say. Let's start our contemplation about how our year went and where we're going, not where the nation is going, where we are going. Because we're going to see if we can't lead the way this year and point people to God's Constitution. Because if they'll follow God's Constitution, it'll bring the rest of us, our nation, needing to follow our Constitution into a straight line where it belongs. Shalom, y'all.